back to back. I can get into this. I'm Joe Terosian, and this is RamView.
It's hot out there. Let's blow them off the line of scrimmage. Headline, Los Angeles.
Live from the Ram Cave, I'm Joe Terosian, and this is RamView, the January 25th, 2024 edition, brought to you by Kistler Law Firm. Injured in an auto accident? Need help? Got questions? Call Kistler Law at 661-206-6990. That's Kistler Law at 661-206-6990. And check out KistlerLawFirm.com. That's one word. KistlerLawFirm.com. Kistler Law, they've been fighting for you since 92. And by Temple City Auto Repair. Having some auto issues? Get yourself some John and Henry at TempleCityAutoRepair.com. And of course, by Granite Ridge Christian Camp, a place where your life can change. And that's the reason I'm back to back. I am leaving to kids winter camp this afternoon. And so I wasn't going to do a Friday show. And so I am back to back. You know, at the very beginning, way back when I was just doing this and flailing on the old set, I did for a time go 5 days a week. And there's nothing better. The shows aren't as long, but you just feel relevant. You're not chasing, when you come on Wednesday, you're not chasing Monday night's news. And so, yeah, I really enjoy coming on back to back. So if you want to come out and be a sponsor and say, Joe, no, we need you 5 days a week, just let me know and we'll work that out for you. A lot of stuff to talk about. We're going to give our predictions for the conference final games, talk about some coaching changes, and we're going to remember the day that the Rams sent Coy for John, and we'll talk about that. But one of the things I wanted to get into just real quick before we start most of the stuff.
Stay in your lane, bro.
I'm going to stay in my lane, but the issue is if you want to know why newspapers, and out here in LA, there's a lot of talk about the LA Times, which was already starting to look like a tabloid, not in the sense of, well, in one sense, the content of it hasn't been very good for years, but just in sense of the size, they cut even more this week. Over 100 people this past week were laid off. And if you want to know why platforms like ESPN and the Times, they're flailing and failing, it's because they keep promoting the same people over and over again. They keep up with the same narrative. It's like almost like Cowherd does it a little bit. Every show, he doesn't make it a big thing. He's smart enough not to, but he always insults people if they have any question about the government, right? Any questions about the vaccine, any questions about what the government says, and he calls them idiots. And he keeps it toned down, but he subtly insults his crowd. And but he keeps it in a safe spot. But ESPN, the Times, they constantly insult their audience. You could have your beliefs. That's great. But when you start coming out and someone like Bomani Jones, this guy fails everywhere. Everywhere he fails. He's a questionable reporter, and he's feeling and sensing and knowing that his only hold in the industry is his ability to inspire anger and create false injustices. And that's kind of slipping away because people aren't going to the Times, to the ESPNs, and these things anymore. And the reason it brought me up is because he touched on football and black quarterbacks. And this thing is so far down the scale now. It's like, who cares? No one cares. Maybe in the 70s, all right? But no one cares, right? They got to go back 45 years ago when there was this really bad scouting report on Warren Moon, right? Everyone says Warren Moon wasn't drafted because of that. I think it was a really bad scouting report because the next year or the same draft, Doug Williams was drafted in the first round. Before that, Vince Evans was drafted, and in a couple of years, he was the Bears starting quarterback. And some fool, some scout, as they're known to do, basically, I think he was with the Patriots, told Warren Moon he had to be a defensive back. And yeah, it was stupid. It was dumb. But we're always going back to that one thing. And then it was the argument that you could never be a black backup quarterback. And boy, Josh Johnson's of the world kind of turned that thing around. Josh Dobbs has kind of turned that thing around. Aaron Brooks turned that thing around. Jeff Blake turned that thing around. And so there's always something to complain about. When Bomani Jones came out and was talking about Americans are really upset about black quarterbacks, the only thing Americans care about in their quarterbacks is, do they make quick decisions? Do they have the ability to fit the ball into a tight window at the second level? And are they mobile in the pocket? That's all Americans care about when it comes to their quarterbacks. And Bomani Jones, he is a real Munson. This guy is just, and he keeps getting jobs, right? He keeps getting jobs. Someone keeps employing Jameel Hill. These people are ridiculous and they're insulting. And and then they tell you what you're thinking, right? Of course, they wouldn't know that our favorite quarterback for the Rams growing up was James Harris, but they'll tell us what we're thinking. And so, abandon those platforms if you must. There's some information that's still there, but the rise of media like this and in other places is really making those places obsolete. And it's a bitter pill to swallow. And, maybe you should get back to the business of sports and staying in your lane, bro. And staying in your lane. Okay, with that said, Rams stuff. The Rams Wire, which I check out every once in a while, it's Cam DeSilva. I think that's the USA Today platform for football. And DeSilva does a pretty good job. The Rams Wire posted 6 players the Rams should consider extending. And they had the usual suspects, everyone we're talking about, right? Dotson, Witherspoon, Coleman Shelton, everyone we've been talking about. But they also had Ernest Jones. And, it's still the latent reporter that still exists inside of me. And I hate to say reporter, I think sports writer. But, we were on Ernest Jones 10 days ago. That Ernest Jones, 10 days ago, we were saying need to be extended. And I like the feeling that we maybe beat Rams Wire to the punch. Not that Rams Wire is bad, but I like it when we beat anybody to the punch. My only disagreement with the piece was Jordan Fuller. I like Fuller, and I'm always in favor of continuity. But did Fuller show anything this year that would make you think the Rams are going to move off their stance of never re-signing their free safeties? Now, if Fuller has no market and there's no one to compete with like it was with Johnny Johnson, that's one thing, and you can bring him back. But to ink him for something significant, let's let that ride, right? Also, what's a lot before we really get into draft talk and free agency and the new season, and this NFL season is winding down, everything's about the awards right now. And hey, as a fan, I will dance on bad calls for a year. I'm bitter. I'm vindictive. I'm spiteful. When there's a bad call, I will not let it go. But I just don't worry about whether or not someone's the comeback this or the coach of the year of that, or they make all rookie teams, or they're all rookie offense or all rookie defense, or even Pro Bowls, right? Bad calls, fine, right? But I really don't care about the snubs that some of the Rams players are going through. Hey, if it motivates the player, that's great. But I don't want to use the oxygen of discussing this team on talking about who was snubbed, because it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't lead to anything. If you're going to do a Rams show or talk about football, you want to talk about what's the next thing, what's happening this week. What are you doing when the new season starts? What are they doing in the draft? What are they going to do in free agency? And you could go over that stuff over and over and over again, and it won't bother me. But I don't want to look back and waste my time saying someone's got to go to the Pro Bowl, someone deserves this award. It's like, yeah, it happened, whatever. Let's move forward. But if you want to talk bad calls, I'm with you with bad calls. I'm all over that one with you. Okay, around the NFL and other places, it officially happened. We talked about it yesterday. Jim Harbaugh inked a 5-year deal with the Chargers. 5 years. That's a good length of contract. I didn't see any terms though. I didn't see in terms of. Of course, he's going to have personnel. The GM will be working for Harbaugh. We know that. Otherwise, Harbaugh's not coming. I don't know how many pesos were involved, but Harbaugh is going to be in charge there. And that's the interesting thing too, because you think of Harbaugh, you think this team is going to be physical, and he's going to build. I think he's going to build on the offensive line. They got to make some changes there, and or some upgrades. And then I also think, they're going to look at another running back, right? They're going to look at another running back And I don't necessarily mean that means Blake Corum's going to come to the Chargers if he's there in the draft. Maybe he would. But what I do believe is Justin Herbert is going to experience the NFL without the potential of getting smashed on every play, right? I think you're going to get a guy who knows offense, and this coordinator is going to know offense, and it's going to make sense, everything they do, and they're going to pound the ball because they're going to be a physical team, and Justin Herbert's going to have time to throw and find his targets. The other thing that's interesting about the Chargers, and again, we should talk to the Mid-Valley guys, my guys Tim and Dwayne, because they're in the room at Mid-Valley Sports. They cover the Chargers, and but one of the things I was thinking about is the Chargers are going to need more help along the offensive line. Corey Linsley, the center, has been really injury prone, and he's earning 14 rocks a year. So that might be something they need to get out of. The Chargers have 7 picks in this year's draft, 3 in the first 100 at number 5, number 37, number 69, and they even own number 105. I think that's a compensatory pick, so that could fluctuate a little bit. But 5, 37, and 69 are probably locked in. And I wouldn't be surprised, because the Chargers have to make some cuts. They have no cap space right now. Khalil Mack is going to be a 38 rock hit next year. Joey Bosa, 36 rock hit. Keenan Allen, 34. Mike Williams, 32. Derwin James at safety, 19. I do like Tom Telesco, who was let go. I think Tom Telesco knows talent, but they foolishly paid for these guys. And I don't know if that was appeasing the then administration of Brandon Staley or what, but that's a lot of dough to be spending on defense, let alone on offense. Herbert's contract doesn't really take a major jump until 2025. Just something to think about. So I could see the Chargers trading out of the number 5 spot, collecting more picks in the first 100 as I think some veterans are going to be put in the street and some moves are going to be made that unfortunately they have to make. If they can keep everybody together, great. But do you really want to pay Joey Bosa 36 rocks a year? You might have to because of the dead cap hit and everything. I haven't broke that down. But I could see Harbaugh jumping out of 5 and accumulating more picks to help rebuild this roster. So that'll be interesting to see. Another thing that was interesting before we get into the other coaching things, and I'm staying in my lane, but we didn't get 24 hours. 24 hours didn't pass before I began reading speculation that Harbaugh would bring Colin Kaepernick back into the league as a backup to Herbert. Never mind the fact that Kaepernick hasn't played a down of professional football since 2016, right? He struggled then and lost his job to Blaine Gabbert. And to think he would do what he did in 2012 and 2013, his best years, in 2024, that he would reproduce that kind of stuff. Teams have had a half decade of dealing with players like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, heck, even Justin Fields, guys who have strong arms, good arms, but also can run like the fastest receivers in the world, right? Or running backs. And the NFL's adjusted, right? The NFL has adjusted. And one thing Kaepernick never did, he never did it with his arm. He never improved. And I think bringing him back would be as much of a reach as people were upset and laughing at Urban Meyer for bringing Tim Tebow into Jacksonville, although he was bringing him in to play tight end. But people laughed at Urban Meyer when he did that. Meyer was mocked. But we know the KBM. If Harbaugh brought in Kaepernick, right, after the league has had all this experience the last 7 seasons without him playing running quarterbacks and really good running quarterbacks who can also throw and play with discipline, that somehow, after not playing in the league since 2016, Kaepernick will be effective. Harbaugh brings him in. The KBM will make Harbaugh a hero, and it's kind of ridiculous. Titans hire Bengals OC Brian Callahan. Callahan was the OC there in Cincy when they went to the Super Bowl against the Rams. But I didn't know this, but upon further inspection, he was also there in Denver with Peyton Manning and in Detroit with Matthew Stafford. If Will Levis is the guy, bravo. If not, but Callahan's going to have his shot to make him or find what else they can do at quarterback. Word came, I think it was Tuesday, that Vic Fangio was parting ways with Miami, and there was discussion that if Raheem Morris leaves for a job as an HC somewhere, that the Rams would reach out to Fangio since the team is still running the defense his disciple Brandon Staley brought in 2020. And even Raheem Morris has kind of kept that same system together. It sounded like a logical thing, except it was reported that Fangio, by the NFL Network, said Fangio is set to ink with Philly and join the Eagles staff. Speaking of DCs, Green Bay let go of former Rams assistant Joe Barry, their DC, who caught fire at the back half of the year, but wasn't enough to save his job. One player that popped up on the waiver wire that I thought was interesting, or signing, was tight end Zach Ertz. I thought Zach Ertz would be signed soon as the Cardinals released him about 6 to 8 weeks ago. And he signed with the Lions this week, signed to their practice squad. And we know, as Ram fans, you could sign a guy late to the practice squad, Eric Weddle, and activate him and have them participate when the time comes. Something to think about. Coaching carousel, Patriots, Jarrod Mayo, Tennessee, Brian Callahan, the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh, the Raiders, Antonio Pierce, and the one that everyone is, I think, got confirmed this morning is Carolina hired Tampa Bay DC Dave Canales. And of course, because he's a minority, Tampa Bay is going to receive 2 third-round picks. So that bodes well for Tampa Bay. Carolina also hired, I thought it was interesting, former linebacker Dan Morgan, who was a really good linebacker with them in the early part of the century, 2001 through about 2008, 2007. I think he made a Pro Bowl. He was on their Super Bowl team that lost to the Patriots. He's their new GM. So they look like they're in place. And that's the interesting thing. 2 things are interesting here. Well, first one would be, I've read no interview requests for Eric Bieniemy. The only place he's interviewed is Washington, right? And so when you look at the jobs that are left, Seattle, Tennessee, not Tennessee, Seattle, DC, and Atlanta. And the coaches that are available, Belichick, Vrabel, Pete Carroll, Ben Johnson, Raheem Morris. A lot of buzz about Raheem Morris, but there's only 3 spots open, and it really looks like the Seahawks are leaning towards Dan Quinn, which I think is great. Lean towards Dan Quinn. That's beautiful. That makes me feel real good as a Ram fan. So that leaves 2 jobs, Washington and Atlanta. You got Belichick, Vrabel, the kid from the OC from Detroit, Ben Johnson. A lot of people think he's the front runner. And then there's Pete Carroll. And of course, that means possibly Raheem Morris will be returning as the Rams DC, which is good for the Rams, right? Which is good for the Rams. Again, if I'm the Taxkins, I am not going with Belichick. If I'm the Falcons, I'm not going with Belichick. If I have to hire a coach that's over 70 years old, I'm going to hire Pete Carroll. I'm just going to hire more Pete Carroll. If not, I'm going to roll with a Ben Johnson or maybe even a Vrabel. So we'll see what happens. Commercial, I'm Joe Tarosian. I do RamView. You guys know this. I was here yesterday. I was a sports writer for 21 years, one of the founding fathers at Mid-Valley Sports. I left there. I'm still close to those guys. They're still in the room. They cover the Chargers. I do RamView, and so I do RamView, and I write books. My books are available on Amazon, and just type in Joe Tarosian. I got 2 football novels there, high school football novels. I got a 3rd novel that I'm working on right now. It's done. We're just in the editing process, called Game Day in the Ram Cave. It's about a bunch of friends watching a football game together, seeing the Rams play. And I'm excited about this one. And I hope to have it out very, very soon. It got kind of delayed with some health issues in December. So we hope to get it out very, very soon. And I write books and I do RamView, thanks to our sponsors at Mid-Valley, at Paul Kistler and his law firm at Kistler Law. But I do that because it keeps me employed in my day job, which allows me to work camps. And I pastor a small church in Burbank Faith Nazarene. And you can see us right here on YouTube on our Burbank Faith virtual channel, as well as all across social media. So cool. We got that stuff out. Usually we ask questions at this time, or let people ask questions. I am on early. I came on at 11 o'clock. So I know not too many people are seeing us now, but if you have questions later, please feel free to drop it in and we'll get to it. Rams update. The Rams officially have dropped Marquise Copeland and Ernest Brown IV. along with cornerback Michael Ojemudia from the practice squad. I think we all knew that was happening when Copeland and Ernest Brown, they were not tendered future contracts. Real big fall for Copeland. At one point, he was higher up in the rotation than Jonah Williams. And then this past year, he fell, didn't receive any playing time, and was cut, practice squad guy, and now it's over for him. And he'd been around for about 3 or 4 years. And Ernest Brown was draft pick in 2021. Just never could find a place for him. Was he an edge? Was he a hand in the dirt guy? No one really knew. He got cut as the playoffs were getting ready to start, and because the Rams activated, I forgot who the Rams activated. I think it was Duke Shelley, and then they re-signed him to the practice squad. But once the season was over, he has been set free. Ernest Brown, the fourth, I believe he was a fifth-round pick out of Northwestern. We'll check that out when we can. Former Rams kicker Luke Haversick, good for him. He's got a job. Cleveland's decided to give him money. And former Ram running back special teams guy, draft pick, I think he was a 7th rounder or 6th rounder, Jake Funk has signed with the Lions and with their practice squad. Just wanted to get that out there. Okay, breaking down another position spot, something to think about in the draft. Again, not projecting anything right now. I want to get into February before we start doing that, maybe post Super Bowl. And then at that point, I'd love for you to start sending me your mock drafts. I'll post them on my website. Give me a name and I'll post them on our website, and that'll be fun to do. I'll give you some of my mock drafts. It's always a great conversation time, and then also talking about free agency. But something to think about for right now are the Rams have 4 running backs on the roster: Kyrene Williams, Ronnie Rivers, Royce Freeman, and Zach Evans. Ronnie Rivers was an undrafted free agent. Royce Freeman was a free agent floating around the NFL. Zach Evans was drafted in the 6th round, and Kyrene Williams in the 7th. And the hope is, at least I believe it is that the Rams hope that Zach Evans will actually become the guy or one of the key guys here. I think they'd like him to be there along with Kyrene Williams. Hey, Ronnie Rivers is a bulldog, and I'm not trying to jump over Ronnie Rivers, but Zach Evans was drafted in the 6th round, but he was more like a 3rd round grade, but he had a chaotic college career, bounced around a lot. And it shows where he's at right now, because he's kind of 4th on the depth chart, because he has to learn how to do what Williams, Rivers, and even Freeman do, and that's block and protect Matthew Stafford. And so it'll be interesting. Rams don't have a huge investment in Evans, so I think they see a lot of talent, a lot of upside, kind of like they saw in Kyrene Williams, and that would be great. It would be nice because Evans has some explosiveness to him, but we don't know if his game is as rounded out. Thus, that's why you saw Ronnie Rivers quite a bit down the stretch, let alone Royce Freeman after when Kyrene Williams was injured. Now, you can find a running back almost anywhere. Anywhere you can find a running back. Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th round, Kyrene Williams in the 5th round, right? And it's not about replacing Kyrene Williams, but acknowledging his size and his penchant for getting banged up. 2 years with the Rams, he's been banged up, right? He's been sidelined for significant time in 2 seasons. Now, this season, he had a chance to show what he can do, and it's great, but he can get banged up. And by the way, he's only under contract for 2 more years. And then you're running into that running back dilemma, right? Rams haven't had to worry about it because I think they were exasperated by Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers, those 2nd round picks that followed Todd Gurley. And you know, they patched it a little bit with Sonny Michel, who did a great job with the Rams. And then Kyrene Williams jumped up. Rams haven't been in a position where they got to think about, do we extend our running back, right? Do we extend him? And again, Kyrene Williams has 2 seasons left before he becomes an unrestricted free agent. So I imagine the Rams want to stock the room. Ronnie Rivers, Royce Freeman, he's a journeyman. We like him. He's a journeyman. Can Zach Evans develop? If not, could the Rams look for a running back in this year's draft? And you don't need to draft a running back in the 1st round. Rams have proven they can go as low as the 5th round and find a running back. The Chiefs they go to the 7th round and find a running back. And there's not one running back in this draft that really pops, but just some guys to keep an eye on. Good size, good speed. They've caught the ball a little bit. Jonathan Brooks, Texas. Trey Benson, Florida State. And the 3rd rated running back although he hasn't demonstrated hands because he played at Michigan that he can catch the ball much, is Blake Corum. And Blake Corum would be an interesting fit if he could slip by the Chargers or in the fifth round. Of course, I don't know how late would Blake Corum drop, but that would be interesting. Again, not about replacing Kyrene Williams, but just keeping that position stocked. Kind of like the Rams always draft safeties, always, right? 2 years ago, it was Quentin Lake and Russ Yeast. This past year, Jason Taylor starting to show some promise. Quentin Lake is showing some promise. I like Russ Yeast. And, of course, those drafts made what? Nick Scott, Taylor Rapp expendable, right? Taylor Rapp and Nick Scott made Johnny Johnson expendable, although I don't think either of those two guys got to the level Johnson was at after the 2020 season. And so you just want to keep the room stocked. So maybe not in the first 100, but the Rams, I think, would be looking at a running back. Okay, let's look at the conference games right now. I threw it out there yesterday. I had to answer it for everybody. Name a quarterback that played for both the Chiefs and the Ravens, and I said it's Elvis Gerbach. But here's the interesting thing. The 49ers are in the NFC conference final, and Elvis Gerbach was drafted by the Chiefs, by the 49ers. He went to the Chiefs, played there several years, and then signed a big contract with the Ravens in 2001, and that was the end of his career. But he also played at the University of Michigan. He was a starter for 4 years. I don't know if he played under Lloyd Carr. I think it was Gary Moeller. And that's interesting because Elvis Gerbach has a touchstone in Michigan with Detroit, Frisco with the Niners, and of course, Kansas City and Baltimore. I just thought it was interesting. When you get to this game, though, the key I can't shake because I got to make my call today, my prediction today, is the Ravens defense is immensely better than the Dolphins and Bills, right? And they should be able to apply the pressure the Dolphins and Bills didn't, right? And get home. Mahomes has not been sacked this postseason, not at all. He hasn't been sacked, and you got to knock this guy down. And if they can do that not all the time, no one's going to do it all the time, but they can do it enough. They're going to disrupt this offense because this offense is so Mahomes dependent. There is no Tyreek Hill, right? There is no Juju Smith, and the receivers are okay. They're not stars, and so that's where I just can't get away from. The KC defense isn't bad, and it's kind of playing for its life because Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed become free agents in March. But I just think the Ravens are playing good ball. This feels like Lamar's time. He's grasped the offense. He's looking downfield all the time. They're not necessarily running him all the time. And that's where he's more dangerous, right? If you know he's going to run the ball, that's one thing. But right now he's running as needed and then occasionally a designed run, and that makes him dangerous. Mark Andrews is coming back in this game, Yeah, I kind of like Baltimore. I'm going to give I was going to make it 35-17, but I decided since Mahomes is playing, I'm going to make it 35-24 Baltimore. I know that seems kind of high scoring, but yeah, that's just what I felt. It's Thursday. I'm not going to get a chance to come back on Friday and reassess, right? So Baltimore 35, Kansas City 24. Interesting thing about Kansas City is, speaking of free agents, Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed in March. On offense, their left tackle, Donovan Smith, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jerick McKinnon, they're all free agents. And we know how old Travis Kelce is looking. Travis Kelce might be looking up at his date, Taylor Swift, when Kyle Hamilton visits him in the ribcage. So Travis Kelce, I don't think it's going to be as easy sledding as it was last week against the aging Buffalo safeties, Hyde and Poyer. Kelce is going to have his hands full, guys like Kyle Hamilton and this defense. So Chiefs will still be good, but I don't think they're going to win on Sunday. And I think they're going to be headed for a reset, not necessarily a rebuild, but a reset come next year. This really is Lamar's time. The guy I mentioned who played quarterback for the Lions and 49ers was Joe Reed. I think he's former Mississippi State guy, and late round draft pick by the 49ers, played quarterback for both teams. got a lot of playing time with the Lions in the mid 70s when Greg Landry and Bill Munson couldn't stay healthy. So wanted to get that one out there. 49ers and Lions. Feels like an upset. Not an upset. I know people are saying it feels like, this is the young team playing the veteran 49ers. And my feeling is if the Lions win, it's not going to be as big of upset as people think, right? The 49ers pass rush and defensive front has not been what it was supposed to be, at least to this point. And the strength of the Lions, I said this on yesterday, is their offensive line. You realize Nick Bosa has not recorded a sack since week 15, and that was against Arizona. Chase Young in 9 games with Frisco, and all that help all around him has just 4 sacks, and like Bosa, Young had none last week in a very critical game against the Packers. Chase Young and Bosa came up craps against the Packers. The Frisco front has not recorded a sack since the Baltimore game. Was that Christmas? And so it hasn't looked as dominant as I was told it was going to look, right? And we saw what the Ravens did to it. I'm not going to count the Ram game, but we saw what the Packers did. The Packers gave the game away. The Packers, how do you say it? The Packers lost. The 49ers didn't necessarily beat them. And if the Packers can run on the 49ers, the Lions with Montgomery and Gibbs and that offensive line, they'll be able to run. And Aaron Jones was great, but you've seen how fast Gibbs is, right? I got an appreciation for Gibbs. I thought the Lions were crazy for drafting him, but you gave a latitude to Brad Holmes, the GM, because you figured Brad Holmes knows what he's doing. And I kind of sold out because I saw Jahmyr Gibbs put him on my fantasy team, and I didn't regret it for a minute. Jahmyr Gibbs is lightning, and which should, with him and Montgomery and that offensive line, it should translate into time for Goff and his receiving core and that vulnerable Frisco secondary. An inaccurate Jordan Fuller, who's a good quarterback. He's going to be really good, but right now he's not exactly the most accurate passer in the NFL. He torched them. Goff is a better passer right now. He doesn't have all the gifts that Jordan Love does, but he's got a better accuracy rate. He's a better passer. Frisco front's not getting to the quarterback the way they should. The strength of the Lions is their front line. Goff has great receivers. Amon St. Brown, let's go. And that Frisco secondary, right? You tell me. To me, the question is, can Detroit make things uncomfortable enough for Brock Purdy? Aiden Hutchinson gets there. We know that. Lee McNeil, as Matthew Stafford knows, is a beast coming up the middle. And so it'll be interesting to see can the Lions slow down? Can Aaron Glenn, the Lions DC, slow down the Frisco attack, right? Not a lot, but just enough. Can they make Brock Purdy uncomfortable? Maybe not a lot, but just enough to see him struggle. Now, I think Purdy's got a lot more grit than some people think, but he was also bailed out by his receivers. And Deebo Samuel's the wild card, but this Lion team is hungry. They're sensing opportunity. And, the first thing you're going to say, and I know everyone's going to say it, is well, Shanahan, they got the advantage at head coach because of Shanahan. I'm sick and tired of people selling Dan Campbell. Let's see him blow 2 or 3 playoff games. Let's see them look like the Cowboys the last 3 years before we say that Dan Campbell, is always overmatched by he's the Kirk and McVay and Shanahan are the Picards, the thinking man's captain, the thinking man's coach. Again, I'll go back to this. Shanahan hasn't won a Super Bowl. Rolled craps on Garoppolo. Garoppolo came up short in that Super Bowl. They moved mountains to get the kid from Trey Lance from the Dakotas. They craps there, and then we're about to find out about Brock Purdy. And again, I go back to it, and maybe it's my Frisco hate. Who was the OC on the Falcons when they had a 28-3 lead on Tom Brady in the Super Bowl? Kyle Shanahan. So there's someplace there where they draw short. I think the Lions win this game, and it won't be as big of an upset as some might think. And yes, I'm prejudiced here. I'm going to give Detroit a 28-20 victory in this game. And then the joy of it for Frisco is, as of right now, when the next season starts, going into next season, Frisco only has 1.3 in cap space. Hooray, 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 right? And their free agents, Randy Gregory, Chase Young, Cleveland Farrell, all that extra meat they brought in along the line of scrimmage. Safety to Sean Gibson. Their starting center right now, John Feliciano and Javon Kinlaw. And so they've got free agents. They got age. They got banged up. And I don't know if it closes all the way, but that Frisco window shrinks. And I hope the Lions can finish them off. If not, I think the Ravens will. And you got to decide what you want. Do you want the brutal experience of not making it to the Super Bowl and not even giving them that satisfaction of saying, hey, at least we made it to the Super Bowl? Or do you want them going to the Super Bowl and getting a repeat of what Lamar Jackson and the Ravens did in Levi Stadium a few weeks ago? Yeah, that could be a lot of fun, right? That could be a lot of fun. All right.
It was a stone groove, my man.
It was a stone groove, but I'm not finished yet. And so let's look on this date in Ram history. On this date in Rams history in 1978, Joe Namath retired. I want to say this about Joe Namath. When you do the research, he was benched after the rainy Monday night loss in Chicago, week 4 of the 77 season. And, it was kind of like a joke and everyone, Namath, that was a bust. But if you read the stories from that time and what Chuck Knox and the rest of the team, even Pat Hayden, talked about Joe Namath, who just turned 80 the other day. Joe Namath was very supportive. Joe Namath was a great teammate. Joe Namath did everything he could to help a young Pat Hayden be ready for the rest of the season. And Chuck Knox spoke glowingly of Joe Namath. And I think it just bears mentioning, right? It should be mentioned. On this date in 2019, 5 days after the NFC Championship game, the NFL decided to fine Nickel Roby-Coleman. I don't know why. Why would they fine Nickel Roby-Coleman? Because there was no flag thrown on him, and they fined him this odd number, $26,739. I wish somebody could explain to me why they work in that kind of numeric equation there. But you know what? I'm sure he had to pay it, or maybe the Rams paid it for him, or his teammates ponied up. But that's $26,000 well spent, right? Well spent, because I'm sick of hearing the Saints. I'm sick of hearing about what they need and how it hurt them and all that stuff. They had a chance to win that game, and they didn't win that game. And it was a bad call. Gee, we've all experienced bad calls. So tough luck, New Orleans. Born on this day in 1943, the late, great Jack Snow. We've talked about Jack Snow, and undrafted Rams free agent who's been with them for a couple years now, Keir Thomas out of Florida State. He turns 26 today, and it'll be interesting to see what his future holds for the Rams. The big news on this date happened in 1973. The Chuck Knox regime was in. Don Klosterman was getting his first off season with the Rams, and he made the move. They traded Coy Bacon and running back Bob Thomas, who had been a surprise the previous couple of years, to the Chargers for quarterback John Hadle. Now, the Chargers were in the motion of making a move to bring in John Unitas there, and Hadle had been their quarterback for 10 years. All those passes you hear about Lance Allworth catching, most of them were from John Hadle. Coy Bacon had been a starter at defensive end for the Rams along with Jack Youngblood in 72. And Fred Dreyer was not necessarily a starter on that team. And Coy Bacon is Coy Bacon. If Coy Bacon played any place else for a winning team, if he was in Pittsburgh those years, he'd be in the Hall of Fame right now. Coy Bacon had an amazing career. But Don Klosterman correctly saw that Coy Bacon had value, tossed in Bob Thomas. The Rams got John Hadle. John Hadle had a great year for the Rams in 73, and he allowed Chuck Knox to plug in Fred Dreyer. Fred Dreyer was then beginning his, second season with the Rams. He played part-time, had 4 sacks in 72. But when he became the full-time starter opposite Jack Youngblood on the other side, Fred Dreyer had 3 straight double-digit sack seasons. And then he was great for the Rams all the way through the 70s. As late as 79, he was registering double-digit sacks. and played on the Super Bowl team. We know who Fred Dreyer is, but it was the ability of someone like Don Klosterman to see that, man, I got double value here, triple value. I got Youngblood, I got Fred Dreyer, and I got Coy Bacon. Bacon was 30 years old, going to be 31. No one knew much longer he last. Fred Dreyer was younger. Jack Youngblood was at the start of his career, only in his second or third year. He used the value of Coy Bacon to bring in John Hadle, and boom, the Rams were back in the playoffs, and that was the deal. And so then, of course, we know what Klosterman parlayed John Hadle to a year and a half later when he sent him to, a little more than a year and a half later, when he sent him to the Green Bay Packers. But that story's for another time. Won't be on the air tomorrow, so we wanted to acknowledge that tomorrow, January 26th, Jack Youngblood turns 73 years old, and TJ McDonald, former USC, former Rams safety, he turns 33 on tomorrow. January 27th, we're not going to be on the air. That's Saturday. I wanted to acknowledge this. The Rams drafted Jack Reynolds, 22nd overall in the 1970 draft. And later in that draft, the next day, on the 28th, they drafted Rick Saul at 204 overall. And Rick Saul and Jack Reynolds were staple starters. Rick Saul is actually a guy who passed away several years ago. He's actually a guy that, you think about it, maybe he should get some Hall of Fame talk. He had a great run in the 70s. And again, I'll throw this back out. Ken Iman came from another team. Rick Saul was drafted 204. Doug Smith in 78 came to the team, was cut, did all this, he had a Bowling Green, and eventually became a Pro Bowl center. And just another testament to the Rams during that time of their scouting and development. You know, kind of reminiscent of what we're seeing with Alaric Jackson and Coleman Shelton. All right. I think we got it in there. Do we got it in there? We got it in there. Okay, now we can.
It was a stone groove, my man.
It was a stone groove, guys. Thank you so much for clicking on, everybody. And everyone's going to click on later. I don't usually go back to back, but today was the day I had to go back to back. Thanks for sticking with me. Guys, be sure to hit like. Be sure to hit subscribe. Some of you are new. We've gotten a lot of new subscribers. I appreciate that. Just to let you know, we will be. Our standard time is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and our plan is to do that through the whole season, through off season as well. Talk about all the stuff that comes up in the off season. All right. Check us out on Spotify. I will be back Monday. God bless. Take care, and we will talk to you soon.